Greetings and welcome to the very first, or rather I should say second episode of our Top 10 series. Now you may recall that about a month ago we released a video called the Top 10 Mods of 2014, and that proved to be so popular I've decided to make this an official series, because people are always asking me what mods I like to play, what mods I consider to be the best mods of all time, and what my favourite mods are. And I cannot possibly compress the sheer number of mods from Morrowind into a single top 10 list. So I'm making this an official series with a new episode airing every month with a top 10 mod list in a particular subcategory or a particular year. And you guys are free to make suggestions, like if you'd like to see the top 10 necromancy mods from Morrowind, we can do that. But for this second episode we're going to focus on the top 10 castle mods from Morrowind. And specifically we're focusing on castle house mods, and that's it. And this list is based on my personal preference. These are mods that I have played, but if we have missed any particular castle house mod, you are free to suggest it in the comments below and we can cover it in a future video. But why don't we go ahead and get started with number 10. Castle Shadowguard. Castle Shadowguard is a house mod released by A. Buer in 2003. And it adds a charming castle to the middle of one of the many lakes of the Ascadian Isles, as you can see here. And the location is really the main reason why it's on my top 10 list, because it blends in fairly well with its surroundings, and it is quite lovely to look at. Not to mention it has a very nice garden in the back, which is very pleasant to stroll through. The castle interior, on the other hand, is a bit on the small side for a castle. It has a lot of the basic creature comforts still, like a throne room, a library, the head of an Argonian over the fireplace, poor fellow, and of course a bedroom. There's also a number of attached rooms, like a study, as you can see here. And of course, no castle would be complete without a treasure room, with areas to display your goods on. There's also a number of other rooms that have a particular function, with service NPCs, like the armory here. And Castle Shadowguard does have a very interesting architectural style. It really mixes architectures a lot. Like you'll have some rooms that are of a Duma architecture, like you can see here, and some rooms that are more Velothian in nature, which adds a certain unique charm to it. And there's even a resident witch that can sell you a number of brews. Number 9. Castle Hivicald. Castle Hivicald is a house mod released by Cyclex in 2010. And as the name would imply, it adds a castle on top of Hivicald Peak on Solstein. And if your definition of a castle is a large, fortified structure, this definitely meets your definition of a castle, because Castle Hivicald is very large and very fortified. It's even manned with ricklings awaiting the defense of the castle to fend off invasions. And it is a very large, very functional castle that includes all the basic castle necessities, like a banquet hall, as you can see here. Not to mention a lot of other services, like a bar, always important to have in a castle, especially when you have a lot of guards around. And the real reason this is on my top 10 list is because it's a big castle in the sheerest sense of the word. It's large, it has a lot of NPCs that are guarding the place. It still has a lot of storage, a lot of display room. And it's also fairly comfortable, if a bit on the dark side. It's got a bit of a homely feel to it, and it also has a ton of services. Not to mention things like this training room where you can watch NPCs training. Not to mention it also goes underground. There's a forge underneath the castle where you can find an armory, as you can sort of see here. And there's, again, as I said, lots of display and storage room. There's tons of rooms like this. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 display rooms like that. And there's a services hall where you can buy just about everything. Well, not everything, but you can buy health potions and the like that. And there's even your own bedroom, which comes with a servant that can give you food and drinks. And that's a nice plus. It's always nice to have a few servants around to do your personal bidding. Number 8. Exenterra Keep. Exenterra Keep is a house mod released by Karana in 2005. And this is very different from most castle mods in a lot of ways, but primarily it's underground, which is not typically where you look to find a castle of really any sort. And also it's a bit on the small side, so again, if your definition of a castle is a large fortified structure, this might not quite meet your definition. But the reason why it's on my top 10 list is that it's a very cozy, very homey castle. You can probably tell from the kitchen here that it's very warm, very inviting, very atmospheric. And that's why it's on my top 10 list, is that it's a castle that has all your typical castle features, like large display halls. Lots of large display halls, actually. But it also maintains that cozy, warm feeling of a small house, which is very unique, I dare say. There's even something of a treasure vault, where you can store your treasured possessions. And there's a large mannequin hall, where you can display armor and weapons and things of that nature. I mean, if you own a castle, you like to display things, that's probably a given. There's also a very large library, especially for a small castle like this. The library is very sizable. Great place to start reading a book. And there are some lovely underground gardens as well, which are very charming and, well, very nice to just take a stroll in. Of course, that's not all. You also have a master bedroom with more display cases. Really, there is quite a lot of display room in this mod. And there's even some lovely small details, like a nursery, for in case you have the Children of Morrowind mod installed. Maybe you've adopted some children and you need someplace to put them. There's this just lovely nursery with even a playground and small chairs and beds. It's all very nice looking. And there's even a number of creature comforts, like a small bath. Number 7. Odai Castle. Odai Castle is a house mod released by Etrurius in 2003. And Odai Castle is very much a more traditional castle. It's large, it's grand, it's fortified. And it's also in the Bitter Coast region, which is a bit unusual for castle mods. There actually aren't that many castle mods in the Bitter Coast region, so that makes it a bit unique. And it also has a very lovely exterior design. It's got multiple layers to it, and it's also in the ocean a little bit, which is interesting. And on the inside, it's a bit more traditional. It has a lot of halls, a lot of places to store and display things. And the reason why it's on my top 10 list is because, well, it is a more traditional castle. It's very large. It has great banquet halls like this one that's just massive. And it has a lot of cool features. And it's not very cozy still, on the one hand. You have this master bedroom here, which is very nice looking. And there's just a lot of cool little things with it. Like somewhat not very traditional display halls that use hutches instead of your typical display cases. And then you have other types of display halls. There's in fact quite a few display halls, one for just about any type of style you can imagine, like this underground one here. And there's also a lot of other features, like an armory. And like any good castle, it has tons of secret passages. There's also a very large servants' quarters, which include about a half dozen to a dozen different bedrooms and rooms for your servants, who are just meandering about the castle. And there's also a lot of unique architecture in use, like there's this Velothi Shrine Room, which is very lovely. Number 6. Krehange Manor. Greyhound Manor is a house mod released by Reflection in 2004. And full disclosure, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing Greyhound Manor correctly. It is a foreign word, and I'm not that great with foreign words. But point is, Greyhound Manor adds a lovely castle-like structure on the outskirts of Saran. And one of the really unique aspects of this mod is that it is based on a historical location. And there's even several books related to the history of this castle-like manor that you can find throughout the structure. And it does have a number of traditional castle-like features, like it has this display hall here. And, well, the reason why it's on my top 10 list is because, well, it's unique. It has a historical background. It's quite cozy. It's a bit on the small side. It has a very small library that you can see here. So, not very grand, I suppose, but it's very nice to look at, very warm feeling. There's a potion lab that you can find here with ingredient jars for just about everything. And it's very practical, very functional. Just about anyone could live here, whether they were a Grand Duke or a minor lord. There's even a comfy bedroom, and lots of storage rooms, and a lovely kitchen. Number 5. Castle Viandin. Castle Viandin is a house mod released by Reflection in 2004. Now I know what you're thinking, we just had a castle mod by Reflection, and you'll notice this a lot, is that a particular author will specialise in a particular subcategory, and Reflection does a lot of castle mods, so you're going to notice that a bit. And Castle Viandin is a rather lovely, rather large castle on the outskirts of Sadrith Mora, and this is a more traditional castle. It's quite massive, as you can see here, with a rather sizable courtyard. And the reason why this is on my top 10 list is because, well, it's a large castle. It is once again based on a historical location. It's based on the real Castle Viandin, and it has a lot of lovely rooms, like that large banquet hall, and this display hall here. But it also has a lot of historical context. You'll notice a lot of books and a lot of paintings that are related to the history of Castle Viandin. You can actually see the development of Castle Viandin from its early origins to its later years, just by exploring the castle. And so you're learning a bit of history as you're just exploring and using the castle as your own house. And that's pretty unique. It is also very finely finished, with a quite beautiful and charming kitchen, like you can see here. And it's just very well decorated, and also very practical to live in. It has several bedrooms, like this one here. And also a mannequin hall, where you can display your stuff. And there's even a balcony of sorts, where you can get a very nice view of Wolverine Hall and Sadrith Mora. Number 4. Yorick's Tower. Yorick's Tower is a house mod released by Sporcarni in 2008. And at first glance, Yorick's Tower is not much of a castle. As far as exteriors go, the castle structure, which is near Nissus, is very small looking. But the reason why it's on my top 10 list is because of the inside. Because the inside is absolutely massive, as you can see from this banquet hall. You can just sort of imagine a lord holding court here with musicians on the upper galleries, playing the Reigns of Castamere. And that's really what makes this castle unique, is that it uses a lot of multi-story design in rooms. Like this display hall is composed of 2 floors, which is quite nice looking. And there's also quite a few rooms overall in Yorick's Tower. The exterior in this case is somewhat deceptive, because you have this large kitchen, as you can see here, and there are dozens of servants' quarters like this one. Not to mention a number of halls and stairways, like you can see here in these stairways. You can actually see up all the way to the 3rd and 4th floor, which is very nice and quite interesting looking. And there's also a very cozy, very homey feeling attic, which has a very nice atmosphere and is full of mannequins that you can use to display armor, along with a lot of other display and storage space. And of course there's a master bedroom, which includes everything from more display halls. There's quite a lot of display space in this mod, even a dining room, and of course there's a master bedroom. York's Tower has a lot of rooms like this that sort of use a multi-story design, including an alchemy lab, which comes with an alchemy sorter, so you can sort your ingredients, which is always very handy. And there's also a bath, and that's always important to have for sanitary reasons. A lord should always be somewhat more clean than the peasants. And like any good castle, it has a dungeon where you can lock away criminals or just lock away people for no reason at all, and there's even a bit of a torture chamber. Number 3, Alvin Drace. Alvin Drace is a landmass mod released by Centurion in 2005. And I know what you're thinking, a landmass mod isn't really a house mod, but Alvin Drace has a ton of castle houses that you can buy or get by quest. And there are castles everywhere. There are castles by rivers, there are castles in the middle of lakes, as you can see here. There are castles on top of cliffs, like this one. And there are castles on top of mountains. Not to mention there are castle-like structures right next to castles. I mean, there's castles everywhere. You may as well rename Alvin Drace Castlelandia, because it's just a castle every 5 feet practically. And these are lovely castles too. They're tall, they're dominating, they're very well fortified, they're large. They're quite impressive looking, and they have, a lot of them anyway, have courtyards and other nice features, and lots of towers. And this one on top of the mountain is quite impressive indeed. And that's the reason why it's on my top 10 list, is because, well, there's just so many castles. If you don't like one, you can just go to another. And they're all very unique. They all have their own banquet halls, like this one here, or this banquet hall here. They all have their own thing going for them, they all have their own design, and so if you don't like one, you can just go to another, and they all have very cool stuff for you to discover, like that painting, or suits of armor, and every good castle should have a suit of armor, at least one, right? And there are weapon racks for you to store weapons on, and of course there are more banquet halls, because you can't have a castle without a banquet hall. And there are a number of display rooms, naturally, with armor mannequins for displaying clothing and armor, dining rooms, rooms where you can just display items. And like any good castle, like we mentioned, it has a bath for sanitary reasons. And there are also dungeons where you can lock away peasants or people who are ill-behaving, and also torture chambers with requisite blood, naturally. There's just a lot of cool things to find in Alvin Drace in relation to castles, like warm and cozy kitchens, some atmospheric rooms, and large galleries where you can just display all your stuff. And that's why it's on my top 10 list, is because it's just so many castles that you can make your home. You could make all of them your home and just travel between them, temporarily holding court before moving on to the next one. There's a lot of that. And it's all just very well done. Very cozy, atmospheric, and, well, dominating, I would say. Number 2, Healess Keep. Healess Keep is a landmass castle mod released by Serendipity 6 in 2004. And if your definition of a castle is a large, fortified structure, like we mentioned before, then this is pretty much the castle mod for you, because as far as I know, Healess Keep is probably the largest castle mod ever released for Morrowind. I mean, this place is massive, as you can probably tell from these clips I'm showing. It's just really huge. It's the size of a city, a very large city at that. You could probably fit the entire town of Balmora inside the walls of Helos Keep. And that's really saying something. You've got tons of towers, buildings, docks, bridges, stairwells, gardens, courtyards, pretty much everything that makes up a castle in Helos Keep. And the interior is just as impressive as the exterior, with large, massive chambers that you can basically fly through. They're just so massive. And there's also tons of indoor gardens and pools that are even come equipped with fish. And that's really what makes this one of my top 10 castle mod picks, is that it's, well, for one thing, it's a massive castle, and it's also very atmospheric and well decorated, with beautiful banquet halls like this one, as you can see here, with a bit of a cathedral theme to it. And it's got so many rooms. There's a throne room, naturally, like any good castle should have, but there's also a ton of other chambers, like, again, massive galleries like this one that are just really span massive distances, as you can see here. And there's also just outdoor galleries that just look up into the heavens. I mean, just look at how tall this castle is, with all these bridges going this way and that way, and halls going off to the side. And of course, there are baths and a pool, like any good castle mod has, for sanitary reasons, as we have mentioned repeatedly during this episode. There's a very nice master bedroom with some wonderful stained glass. There's also display halls where you can store your stuff, with roaring fires. And not to mention a giant armory, where your knights can get equipped with armor and weapons, and there are quite a few knights and NPCs in this mod. You really feel like your castle is basically a giant city, because there are hundreds of NPCs roaming the halls, and these are definitely massive halls indeed. Number 1, Solstein Castle. Solstein Castle is a landmass / house / quest mod released by Korana in 2005. And it's a very massive, very imposing castle, based in the northeastern reaches of Solstein's coast, as you can see here. And it really is a very lovely castle, and the reason why it's my number 1 top pick for Morrowind castle mods is because, well, for one thing, it does include quests, which a lot of castle mods don't, and that's always a nice bonus. And it also has this very nice garden out back, but also it contains very atmospheric interiors, which, despite the fact that the interior is dominated by these massive halls, it still contains warm furnishings that feels very cozy, and it's staffed by a lot of servants, guards, minstrels, and all of these are put on schedules. In fact, you won't always have the same servants in the same area. Your servants go on breaks occasionally, and well, there's a nighttime staff and there's a daytime staff, which is very unique for Solstein Castle. And there's also a massive library with stacks upon stacks of bookshelves for you to peruse, not to mention a roaring fire that you can read books next to. And it's also a castle where you can just sort of get lost in. It's just so massive. There's tons of display halls, like this hall with mannequins in it, where you can put your armor on display, or your weapons. There's also a training room, where you can raise your skills. And other display halls, where you can display all the other stuff that doesn't get displayed on the mannequin. There's even a trophy room of sorts, with cliff races and bears and deer. And also a wilderness preserve in the basement, which is a pretty unique feature. You can see the wildlife in its natural habitat, more or less. There's also a bath and pool, where you can, be sanitary, which is always important for the lord of a castle. There's also a cozy but large master bedroom, including a piano, and also someone to keep you company which is an interesting feature to say the least. There's also large magical labs filled with books and alchemical apparatuses and other magical items, not to mention mages who can assist you with anything you might desire. And of course there's a lady's chamber, which is opposite the Lord's chamber, and it's quite lovely looking, with lots of potted plants and ivy. Very, very atmospheric and cozy looking. Honourable mention number 1, Arianix Castle. Arianix Castle is a castle mod released for Terraria built by Humitheon in 2009. And this is a very massive, very impressive looking castle based in the Boethian Mountains of Terraria built's mainland. And the reason why this is only an honourable mention though is because it has not been kept up to date with the current version of Terraria built, and as a result sort of conflicts with the current version of Terraria built, with foliage and rocks just sort of being cluttered around the exterior, as you can sort of see here. It's very unfortunate, because otherwise this would be on the top 10 list with a proper ranking, because there's this lovely beautiful main hall with fountains and potted plants and statues, and also a massive banquet hall. It has pretty much everything a castle should have, including a very cozy library with a number of books that you can read. But unfortunately this conflict with the newer version of Terraria built does hold it back from the top 10 spots. There's even a hall full of musical instruments and fireplaces where you can just warm your feet. There's a grand piano, as you can see there. And also an alchemy lab, which includes alchemical pots to hold ingredients for both vanilla Morrowind and Terraria built, which added a ton of new alchemical ingredients to the game. So that is also very handy to have. And of course, there's a bath/pool, which you should probably expect by now because pretty much every mod we featured has had a pool or bath of some sort. And a lovely master bedroom with banners just coming down from the ceiling. And also a beautiful map of Tamriel just sort of over the foyer there. Very nice looking. There's even a balcony overlooking the main hall. And really, Arianix Castle is a very cool castle mod and definitely worth checking out. Honourable mention number 2, Caledon Keep. Caledon Keep is a house mod released by Sauron in 2003. And Caledon Keep, as you can see here, isn't exactly a large castle. It's a decent size, and you can find it in the Azur's Coast region. It's fairly lovely looking, and the reason why this isn't on the proper top 10 rankings listing and is a honourable mention only is because of a regrettable conflict with Blood Moon. That's right, it conflicts with the Blood Moon expansion. This was probably released right before Blood Moon came out, and so as a result there's an object ID conflict if you try to run this with Blood Moon. It's very easy to fix, but that sort of keeps it from being in the top 10 spot. Because otherwise it would be. It has some very cozy, very warm and inviting halls, has a nice banquet hall and kitchen, as you can see here. All very lovely, very well finished. It also has a fairly decent sized services hall with a bar, an armory, a number of knights to protect the castle. And really, Caledon Keep has a lot of the features you would like to have in a castle mod, as a lot of servants' quarters and bedrooms for you to use. It has some display and storage space as well. And overall, it's just very nice looking. But unfortunately, that conflict with Blood Moon does hold it back a bit. But it is worth checking out if you've got the time and can open up the Enchanted Editor and just fix those issues. Because it's very, very lovely looking, as you can see here. And anyway, that pretty much wraps up everything we have for our top 10 castle mods. And if you have a castle mod that was not featured on this list, do please share it in the comments below. And do let me know what type of top 10 mod list you'd like to see next month. We'll be releasing the next video on the 8th of March, I believe. That's what I'm aiming to release, anyway. So if you've got got something that you'd like to see in the next top 10 mod list, do let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.